Hi, Tom. How are you doing today?
Good, Ben. How are things going with you?
Doing great. Really appreciate you taking some time to talk with me and learn a bit about you and start. I thought no one else would be able to describe this stuff better than you. So why don't we just start? I mean, tell us, people watching this video, maybe they've not heard of the great Tom Cullison before, but tell us a little about yourself and what do you do?
I would expect they would not have heard of me before. So yeah, I'm Tom Cullison. I'm the director of software development here at IC/Start. I've been working on Start since 2018. It started as a consulting project that we worked for another company with, and eventually we were like, this is such an awesome tool that we need to acquire ourselves. And so we picked it up and started distributing it ourselves. And since then, I've been the director of the team. The team has grown over the years. We've got some great developers on our team. We've got some QA folks and project managers and things like that. And it's been a really fun challenge for the last 5 years or so.
Yeah. 5 years is kind of an eternity when it comes to this sort of thing. It seems like it's not that long of a time, but when it comes to development, it's everything. So
Oh, definitely. I mean, technology's changed so quickly. It's hard to keep up with them sometimes. It's really a challenge to look at some old code and say, I just need to change this code just because it looks old. But when it works, it works. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense to just try to fix something that's not broken.
All right, cool. Let's talk about the actual product start. So somebody's probably watching this video. Maybe they're new to like third-party risk management, et cetera. They're trying to solve a problem. But what is Start and what's the big problem we're trying to solve with it?
Start is a vendor risk management tool, a tool where basically a team of security experts can track the assessment process from beginning to the end, starting with one of their business users trying to work with a vendor, trying to procure that vendor to use their services or product or something like that. And they need to vet that vendor. They need to make sure that they check all the boxes and are fully compliant in order to use them. It's a step in the procurement process that everybody should be taking. But where we differ is we try not to get in the way. So Start should not halt the business process. So we try to make this process as quick and painless for people as possible. So today, folks are sometimes sent massive Excel spreadsheets that are questionnaires, and they're just huge. And nobody wants to go through these. Enterprises have entire departments dedicated to just filling these questionnaires out.
Like,
It's so redundant. Sometimes things just aren't relevant to what that company does. So what we do, our special sauce is we filter down the whole assessment process to what service the vendor is going to provide. So for a company that you're just trying to get their trucking companies they use or something like that, something that's not relevant. That's probably a bad
so,
example, but
well, but I mean, you kind of touched on something that's sort of interesting. So it's really kind of a two-pronged problem, right? So first is the actual reason that these assessments are happening in the first place, right? So we need to make sure that our supply chain is secure, that the people we work with are handling our data properly, et cetera. But a part of that is the organizational challenge of actually doing it. It's nice to talk about doing all these assessments, but you actually have to create a management structure, a organizational structure to make it happen. It sounds like that's how we approach Start, right?
yeah, exactly. Today, folks use Excel spreadsheets and emails to do this work. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
No.
Let's systemize it. Let's make something that actually will send the reminders out for you, or will gather the results and then automatically notify you when the results are gathered and things like
Yeah.
that. It just doesn't make sense to have such a manual process of emails and spreadsheets and Word documents and things like that. We're beyond that at this point.
And don't like many of these organizations we work with, we're talking not 5 vendors. We're not talking just a few companies we work with. We're talking literally dozens and dozens of vendors that they have to manage this for, correct?
Thousands. We have
Thousands.
vendors who have
Oof.
6,000 vendors, and a team of maybe 4 admins manage the whole assessment process for them. I'm sure they have plenty of auditors and people out in the field, but it really doesn't take many people to just let the system do the tracking for them.
Mm. Yeah, I think managing 6,000 of anything is is potentially a gigantic problem. So you need all the organization you can, and accuracy too. I mean, a flub when it comes to this kind of thing could be the difference between a breach and not a breach, or something like that.
Sorry to interrupt, but imagine
No.
fat fingering an email address, and you have like 500 different Johns that you have to communicate with. You have to make sure you send it to the right one. Like it's the whole process is fraught with challenges like that, and you just need a tool to manage it for you.
Yeah, I could definitely imagine fat fingering stuff in my email for sure, from experience.
Yeah.
So how did we approach sort of solving the problem? Like, obviously, we recognize all of these issues, but what about that? Identifying these problems. What logic went into building the platform? What were we looking to target specifically to make it super functional?
Yeah, automation was number one. So you have limited resources, you have a huge backlog of work. There's no way that that a human being could tackle all of that work.
Mm,
So you need to let the computer do the thinking for you, and the scheduling and the reminders and the notifications and things like that. Second is we put the data right in front of your face as much as we can. We have really thorough dashboards, and you can customize your own dashboards to essentially, when you sit down in the morning with your cup of coffee, you can see what your work is today. I need to review these reports. I need to schedule these audits. I need to notify a business user that I'm rejecting something or something like that. And we put that information right at the security users' fingertips. Also, for the business users, we keep them involved in the process too. You can subscribe to a vendor and get notified anytime that the status of that vendor changes. If
oh,
there's
that's interesting.
something that was found along the way, you can get details of why I'm not allowed to use that vendor, or you can champion that vendor to hurry along the process. And we're really trying to engage with you. Let's speed this along and things like that. And so it really provides everybody in the assessment process a portal to participate and to actively do their part in the assessment process.
And it sounds like it's really one of the things that with the solution is it's really focusing on, action items and, getting people who are in the managerial positions to actually resolve these problems and make, create success, giving them the tools they need to actually take actions, not dealing with a bunch of spreadsheets, right? Like, where's your time better spent? Dealing with the vendor who has some challenge that needs to be resolved that's actually risky for you, or pouring through a bunch of documentation to dig through a spreadsheet or check in on people manually. That just seems like a huge nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, so many times when you do things manually, you lose who's currently up to bat, whose desk is this work sitting on. But we know at all times what we're waiting on in the assessment process. We're trying to get it done as soon as we can so we can get the business to work,
Yeah.
and try to get out of the way.
So I'm going to pivot a bit, and I want to talk about ISE. You alluded to this earlier in the discussion, which is that, we worked with these vendors before, et cetera, and you've been working on the platform for a long time. Outside of what we do on Start, ISE is a ethical hacking company. We do application security assessments, device hacking, corporate pen tests, all sorts of stuff. So do you think that just our experiences as a cybersecurity consultancy impacts the way we look at these problems maybe differently than most?
Yeah, I mean, for one, we're a user of the system too. We are the assessing companies that clients reach out to perform
Yeah.
these assessments, and sometimes so we have our own portal into the system, and we've tweaked it to the point where it makes sense for us to use. We make the assessor a first class user, and not just like some afterthought or somebody that's CC'd on an email.
Mm.
So, like I said, everybody involved in the assessment has their own view into what's going on. So that was really important. We were like, analysts are people too, and they need to be involved. But from a security standpoint, it's hugely important to us from the get-go. From the code that we write, we have a handful of security analysts right down the hall that we can just hit up as far as, is this the right way to do this something? Is this the best practice for any security related code that we're writing, and that's been a
Yeah.
huge resource. They're like a second level of QA for us, which is
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. That's really cool.
But just the importance of this whole process, we've seen through history of all of the hacks and vulnerabilities that have been discovered, that this is a really important part of the process. And any way that we can ensure that it gets done and balance that with getting work done is hugely important.
Yeah, as you point out, we have insights into the assessment process. We know where these things can go haywire from both an assessment perspective and a project management perspective. So, yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying. How do you think, you were saying that you started working on the platform in 2018, which it really is like an eternity when it comes to software development. I mean, think about some of the things we were using in 2018 or the things that have completely disappeared since 2018. How do you think, like, just in general, third-party vendor risk management has changed over the years, and how has that sort of impacted the way we continue to develop on Start? I mean, Start's, obviously it's a live product, but at the same time, it's not like we're just letting it sit. We're making it better, newer, et cetera.
Yeah, unfortunately, economics plays a huge part into this. I mean, we kind of see an ebb and flow in how much people care about security with how well the stock market goes, which is just really unfortunate.
Yeah.
You think it would be like there would be a baseline investment that everyone's uh, trying to meet, just to ensure that they don't lose everything at the end of the day, which is unfortunate. There should be just a baseline security that everyone's sticking to, and not balance it with budgets and things like that, which is kind of crazy. So we've seen budgets go up and down, and it's feast or famine sometimes with the security processes, and we see companies really make a huge push when they do have budget, and then back off a little bit when budgets go away. What we try to do is fill in that gap ultimately.
Yeah.
So if you have a system that is fully automated and something that you don't need a whole crew of people to manage, then you can save money on that process, and you don't have to add 27 new heads to do security audits on your vendors. You can add 4 and get the same work done.
Yeah, resource management is incredibly complicated and difficult, especially when it comes to security. Obviously we have our biases here as a as a cybersecurity company. We believe that security needs to be seen as kind of an investment. If we're building these platforms, we're doing all this stuff with the data. I mean, technology is at the core of work. If you don't have secure technology, you don't really have an operation. And while it is frustrating to hear the budget constraint issues, the ebb and flow of the economy and stuff like that, we have to sort of recognize where we're at on this, which is that you can't necessarily control the amount of resources that are available to you. What you can really control is how you use those resources effectively. Given enough time, I think it's safe to say that anything can be broken, anything can be hacked, and taken apart. The goal is to use our resources in the way that's most effective so that we don't have to deal with these things.
Yeah, and I think that's where Start falls into place.
Yeah.
We can help ensure that people who are in this workflow aren't idle, aren't waiting on emails to go through and things like that. That everything is like event driven, and it can be as efficient as possible. There's my software dev kind of showing up.
So, what do you think about, and obviously we don't want to be too specific here, put anybody in a bad place, but like, what are the sort of consequences when third-party risk isn't really managed today? Like, when these things aren't effectively handled, how does this manifest in a working environment? I mean, what are the trickle-down effects?
So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the lion's share of data breaches happen through a vendor, through a third-party mechanism. So the consequence is pretty dire. Like, if you can't be sure that the vendors you're working with, don't qualify as a sound security team, then your assets are at risk ultimately.
Yeah.
And you need to have a little, warm and fuzzy feeling that at least you've ensured that we've checked the box, we've talked them through this, and we know they meet certain criteria, and that
Yeah.
alone is worth going through.
Yeah.
And when you do find something and fixing it, that's the real value that we bring. It's a whole net of security that we're trying to make sure we tie up each loose end. There aren't any gaps that things could fall through. And it's going to happen, like you said. It's just a matter of when. But keeping on top of things, making sure that we're reviewing the process over and over again, that all of our vendors are doing their best to meet that criteria. It's gonna certainly push that off and make at least the exposure a whole lot less. Let you know exactly what you have at risk if something is ever picked up. Because I mean, that's half of what we do. Is we can tell not just that a vendor is signed off on, but what assets are they qualified for, or what projects have they been working on. So if anything does happen, unfortunately, we can at least help remediate those as quickly as possible and know what the situation is without grasp at straws and pivot and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are doing this conversation in Baltimore, Maryland, and we were recently talking about a breach that happened with Johns Hopkins here. It was, the headline says Johns Hopkins breach, but the breach was actually of an application they used. This application called Move It. It's not, look, I'm not trying to point fingers or say who did what or what have you. But the reality is that on the top line, people look to the big entity for who is responsible for these issues. When they have their data breached through Johns Hopkins of their medical data or what have you, they don't care about Move It. They care about Johns Hopkins, fortunately or unfortunately. And to some extent, that is correct because the parent entity is responsible for the tools that they purchase and use.
And they have the most on the line, ultimately.
Yeah.
Like you said, these are medical records that were unfortunately available for Johns Hopkins, actually. And the work that Johns Hopkins has been doing to remediate this has been extremely expensive. I know. It's going to hurt them for a while, I think, too. Not to pick on them, this happens to companies. But again, it wasn't directly their fault. It was just that one of the tools they were using was breached.
Yeah, it's not their fault, but it becomes their problem ultimately.
That's true.
Yeah. Let's talk about some fun stuff. So if you had to, I don't mean to make you choose which is your favorite child, but tell me some of your favorite features of Start. What's the thing that really gets you excited the most?
I like our customization ability.
Hmm.
So you can take virtually any record that you have in the system and add custom fields to it and kind of customize your experience. From when I talk about vendors, I really care about a vendor location ID, or I care about a vendor, a certain date that's applied to the vendor or something like that. And you can add those fields ad hoc to the system and they can be front and center. So it can really be formed to your given needs. That's not
great.
to say that the workflow is very customizable. We do that on purpose. The workflow should be fairly strict, fairly standard.
Interesting.
Creating an assessment request, doing the assessment, generating a report, publishing the report, things like that. But the actual records they're associated with are really flexible. And then the other customization that I really like is the customization of our dashboards. You can generate a view that is perfectly suited to you. So you can see a snapshot of everything that you need to see in one frame. And I think that's an amazing thing to have. I love putting myself in the user's shoes and just imagining just being able to see everything all at once, clicking right through it, and having everything filtered down to what I'm looking for exactly, and getting right to business, and not shuffling through Word documents or searching through spreadsheets and things like that.
Hopefully you didn't upset any of the other devs who were like, you should have talked about this feature. This feature is totally better than that feature.
I mean, there are ones that are great outward facing, and then there are things inside that it does that we're really excited about, like some of the system architecture that's going on, and we think is really clever, and we really like it. Some of the efficient stuff that we've done in the past few years. It's hard to predict how users are going to use the system sometimes, and it's hard to really understand the different load situations that you're going to run into at a given client. So they've presented us with some really challenging issues based on how they're using it, and we're like, great, let's architect a solution for that. And we've been able to do that pretty well, I think.
That's awesome. Tom, I really appreciate you chatting with me about all of this. I learned a thing or two. I spend all my time on the assessment side, and I always like to hear about what's going on the development side of the business. So I really appreciate it. If you want to learn more about START, where can people learn more about the product?
So you can visit our website. We have a new website, startvrm.com, that you can go in and poke around and see how the system works and what we have to say about it. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, so we're available there. That's the best
Great.
place to find us.
Thanks so much, Tom. And yeah, again, feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to learn more about START or how we can help you out and help manage your security and third-party risk needs. Take care,
Thanks,
everybody.
Ben.
All right, thank you.